But anyway, tell us about your career. How you got into local government, where you started. So was Charters Towers your first council?
No, that was my seventh.
Your
By
seventh?
the time I got there.
Seven councils?
7 council in 10 years, I think it was.
Wow, so what councils were there?
I started Cloncurry, Bay Desert, Maryborough, Winton, Mount Perry, Charters Towers, Charters Towers, that's 6 on this one out.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And were you CEO at all of those?
No, Charters Towers was my first CEO's role. Yeah. Good Burrum, I was Good Burrum at...
yeah. So what did you start as?
Just a cost clerk.
A cost clerk, yeah.
In Cloncurry, yeah. On a fantastic wage, nearly double what a labourer was on at the time. It was fantastic wages. They were just giving wages out like that, you know. Dad, he was CEO at Richmond Shire.
Oh, your dad was a CEO too. Oh, so it's been a family.
And my father was a CEO. My grandfather was a CEO.
Oh wow! So the whole generation of.
Like you said, that was it. I was there before I started.
Yeah.
I was always going to work in local government, and Dad made sure I did. But I mean, you don't know. So, yeah, this is what you do. You go there. Oh, yeah, okay, right.
Yes.
There you go.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was always going to do that. Yeah, so, got a good bit of history there for the start of the story, I suppose.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, what about current generations? Are there any relos in local government?
No. I went in, then Tony followed me. And started in 1971. I hit Charters Towers in 1980. That was my 7th council, and in between that I had 12 months off travelling around Australia. So it didn't last too long. So nearly 2 years in most places. Yeah. So when I hit Charters Towers it was 1980, and I stayed there then for 28 years. Yeah.
So role models. Did you have any local government role models? Obviously your dad and your granddad, they would have been...
Yeah, all them, yeah. No, as I said, I started, my grandfather was Shire Clerk at Winton, Alfred Jericho, Burketown, and lately he retired out of Lately in there. And Dad was Shire Clerk at Richmond for 44 years. And it was just automatic that I was going to become... I was going to become a Shire Clerk, that's all I wanted to be. So once I started in Cloncurry, I then moved, next job was at Bay Desert. I was pay clerk there, I think it was, and committee clerk. Worked with the likes of Keith Stuckey and Terry Moore and Stan Rowley. And Greg Dave. Greg was on the staff there at the time, ended up at Bay Desert. Then I went around, got married, went around Australia and came back and worked at Maryborough with Merv Kidd for only for about 12 months there, and then I went out to Winton. And I was 2IC in Winton with Jim Scrimger. And then I moved down to Mount Perry and just in from Bundaberg there. And then I went and worked for Ray Gesling at Good Burrum Shire.
Oh, and,
wow. So that was a long time ago. And then Good Burrum, I ended up going to Charters Towers in 1980. So I commenced there as CEO in 1980. And I'm staying there until 2008.
Okay, so you would have seen the new acts come in.
So all the new acts.
Yeah, the 93 Act.
Yeah, all of them. So Winton was good. Charters Towers was good. I applied for a couple of jobs out of Charters Towers and just missed a couple each time. But as it turned out, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
Kids and all that type of things are good. And I actually went to boarding school in Charters Towers for 3 years at All Souls there, so it was like going back home in a way. And we just kept keeping on. Charters Towers, it should have always been amalgamated. We had, I think we had 62 square kilometres, Charters Towers City was, and the Shire was something like 57,000. So it was huge. Yeah, so the best thing that ever happened. But unfortunately, I always thought that when the amalgamation happened that Charters Towers would take over Dalrymple, but as it turned out at the time, Dalrymple took over Charters Towers.
Yeah.
That, I don't know that it's even worked now. It's reverted back the other way now, but for the last 8 years or so, or nearly 10 years now, it's taken them a while to convert, which is a bit sad, but that's the way it is. I wasn't there. I opted out at the time, right on amalgamation, and we went out on probably better terms than some of the CEOs now when all they do is finish up their contract and move on. Makes it a bit difficult. I would have hated to have been in that situation back in my day, but I suppose there's ways around it. Yeah.
What about role models, who do you consider were some of your role models? I
Well,
guess you've mentioned a few names.
Yeah, most of
already.
what I worked for, I'm like, as everyone does with Keith Stuckey, he was one of the best role models, I guess, at Beaudesert. And Terry Moore was there at the time, and you pick up a little bit from each of them. But I guess my father was probably the role model. I mean, I was always going to be a shy clerk because of what Dad, my coming, my calling. I guess I always liked the communities, local government, tied up in the communities. You found yourself mixed up with organisations right through all those towns I was in. And Dad was pretty much the same too. And yeah, it's just happened. And 40, 50 years later, that's why it all happened. Yeah. Well, he was going to leave Richmond. He stayed in Richmond for 44 years. I think he got there when he was under 21, less than 21. He became Shire Clerk of Richmond, or I think it was Wangry Shire then, and converted to Richmond later on. So he took over the roles there. And he stayed for 44 years. So.
What about people that you worked with? I imagine that you had a lot of people during your career that looked up to you and considered you yourself as a role model.
Yeah.
Does anyone spring to mind?
Well, we certainly tried. I mean, I had a number of in a place like Charters Towers, particularly in later years, it got harder and harder to get the right qualified employees. But the directors or managers and that we used to call them, I had a list of them. I was hoping you'd ask me that question because I did list them all, but they're probably too many to name.
Oh, I'm sure they'd love to hear.
We had people like Garnet Wright, Harry Bergen, Phil Mara, Brian Jones, Alan Ether, Tammy Power, Bob Reed, Alan Raymond, Clyde Berryman and Leo Salinas. They were all people either tied up as deputy town clerk or managers or health surveyors, building surveyors, sort of just that management level that we had. And I found them all fantastic. It was a great working atmosphere. And I think one of my abilities was just to have stability. I don't know if I'd be able to do that today, but we had good stability back there. And the councillors were, as a rule, all pretty good, and the mayors were, as a rule, all pretty good. I always think that some of the mayors were probably better, mainly because of the stability we created. Yeah. They were mainly long term. And as you know, some of them come into the game with not a real lot of knowledge of local government. I suppose one of the highlights of my career was having the local police sergeant elected as mayor. Oh. So for about 18 months I had the police sergeant, who was always also the mayor. That was something a little bit different. Brian Beveridge, that was. Brian was there for quite a number of years, about 14 years, I think, as mayor. So.
Very community focused, obviously.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he sat as a councillor there for a while after the amalgamation as well. So he committed himself to the town. Yeah. And
what changes? Obviously, it's a long career. What changes did you observe in your time?
We had many changes. We never had a lot of money in Charters Towers. And I suppose I've always been a bit of a spendthrift. I'll work it the other way around. I never liked spending money, and I always said to the staff that before you spend any money, just think of it as your own, not as somebody else's. And if you think of it that way, you are very frugal and very mindful with what you spend. We created a lot of things. I mean, one of my fortes, I guess, was just beautification and parks and gardens for the town. And I had a bloke I mentioned there, Clyde Berryman. He was in charge of parks and gardens, and we had enough men in the parks and gardens area. We always made sure we had an extra couple to just do projects and not tell anybody. So we'd say, "What about this?" He'd say, "Yeah, I can do that." So we'd go and create this garden, and you didn't have to rely on maintenance. But yeah, we did a lot of good things there in Charters Towers. We had like water supply issues, major issues there with the Burdekin River. When the Burdekin wasn't in flood or wasn't running, the town suffered, and we had some major catastrophes there because of lack of water. So we pumped a lot of money into the community, or into the water supply. And one blessing that Charters Towers had was Mount Lishan Gold Mine opened up about 40 k's to the south of the city, and they needed water. So one of their major projects was to get water from the Burdekin River, which was on the 20 k's to the, I guess you'd say, the north of the city, I think it was. And they put a pipeline in, they put it in, and when they closed down, it became councils. So we suddenly used that and put booster pumps into
Great.
to serve the town. They paid, I suppose, an overinflated price for the price of the water, and with that we paid for all the water projects and were able to pay off our loans and did a lot of work. So
Well done.
the mining was very very beneficial to
Yeah.
us. In a way that wasn't a straight grant from like some mining companies just give grants over to the councils. Well, we never had any of that, but we sort of had it in other ways.
What about legislative change? And you would have seen massive change from the early days.
Yeah,
to
well,
the increased legislative
yeah,
application.
it just
cost
kept
shifting.
happening, and I know one of the big changes came back in the 80s when Queensland Treasury Corporation was created, and suddenly they were offering arrangements to repay loans, because back then I think the council there had about $7 million in debt, which was a lot of money. And we used to borrow every year for water and sewerage and roads. And QTC said, well, we can amalgamate all your loans into one bulk sum with us, take them away from the banks. And the interest rates at that time were 17-18%. It was just killing us. And for some reason I said, well, I spoke to the Treasury officials, and I can't remember their names now, but gee, they did us some good turns. And we put ourselves on a 10-year debt-free project. About 8 years later, we were debt-free. So it was a great project. And I used to discuss it at conferences, and blokes used to say, oh, no, I'm not going ahead with that. No, we don't want to do that. That's, it's all fabricated and da-da-da-da. It's going to cost us money. And I said, well, it looks all right to me. I guess we came up with a lot of money towards the end of that because we weren't paying out so much.
Yeah.
But we were keeping rates reasonably low. But then like accrual accounting came in, and they started putting more and more money away into the sinking funds, that we used to call them, I think so.
Yeah.
Reserves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had stacks in there to cover all these future. Yeah. As for other legislation, well, I suppose you can, as I commented before, the governance side of things just became more and more, and you go from not having an accountant on staff to having an accountant on staff. You suddenly got governance officers, and you had to comply. There was no level of implementation. You were either a council or you weren't. So whatever Brisbane City did, Townsville City did, we had to do.
Now we just see the introduction of all the levels of reporting, the need for corporate plans and operational plans.
Yeah.
On smaller councils, that must have been another
It was.
impact.
I guess we went through the motions, in a way. We had to report on it every 3 months or so. So we went through and did it and made the paperwork, but we weren't following it that much. But I think like the 5-year and 10-year plan certainly helped. They made us start thinking about the future, which we weren't really. We were day to day and year to year and doing a budget. What are we going to do this year? Well, no, suddenly you've got to do what you're going to do in 5 years. And that was good. It opened up everybody's mind and got councillors thinking into the future. So
More strategic.
yeah, the strategic side of it, the thinking side of it was good. I enjoyed that. It was implementation and keeping the records and that type of thing,
Yeah.
which got a little bit tough.
It's a big, even back then, being a CEO was a big job, a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
lots of things to do. I mean, local government is so diverse that, and even in the small places, even back then, there was still a lot to cover and a lot of community expectations.
Yeah, so many different avenues, and so you've got to manage the best way you can. And all the people that I had, all the staff I had, always said yes, we'll do it. There was never no, I'm not going to do it. So they were good, and they did it to the best of their ability. I mean, I did it to the best of my ability, and I knew there was mainly males, I guess, out in the local government industry, CEOs that were far smarter and brighter than me. Some of the things they used to do, and I used to think, well, I could do that. So you'd go and do it, but so you've all got your limitations, and they had theirs, I had mine, but councillors had theirs.
Yeah.
But we all just worked the best way we could, and
I think that was part of, I know, my introduction to local government. Part of the great thing about the IMM at the time was there was a lot of sharing of information and knowledge.
yes,
Quite
yes.
free flowing. And I'm sure it still happens now, but it's a lot more complicated to share even the way we do things, because we're all such different councils nowadays.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all,
Yeah.
it's not really apples and apples.
No.
We're all very different in our unique ways.
Well, we had the like the institute, as I keep calling it that because that's easier to say. The northern branch up there, so we'd meet twice a year at various places, and it was all like real down to earth stuff, grassroots discussions and all that type of thing. You know, it's amazing that you discuss elections and how you count votes. Yeah, Charters Towers is an old mining town, so you had like MHPLs, MHLs, GFHLs, that's mining homestead leases, grazing homes, all that, millions and millions of them. And if you wanted something like a road to go through, oh, that's supposed to be a bit of Crown land or something, you just ring up a local bloke in town. Well, what about this? Oh yeah, no problem. Within 2 weeks it'll be fixed. And then it started becoming, oh, you better write to me, and then I'll write to the Director General, and then he'll see the Minister, then I'll come back. And so, yeah, mining, Charters Towers was a bit unique in that way with the number of, like everybody's home was built on a MHPL or an MHL. It was quite amazing, and they freeholded those back in the 90s somewhere, I think so.
In your career, highlights, lowlights, anything that jumps to mind?
Yeah, well, I think it was just the community aspects of things was the major contribution, I guess one could say they made. The IMM was always something you look forward to, the annual conferences and all that. We probably enjoyed them a bit more than we probably should have at different times. They were always great times, and there were you made a lot of friends through those contacts, and I think that was probably the highlight of my career, being tied up, and you could just pick up the phone to almost anyone in the state and talk. That was quite good. I mean, there were quite a few job highlights, I guess. It's a bit hard to go back over too many of them. I think I've mentioned them, a few of them there. I think another one of our little contributions we made in Charters Towers was one of the actual boarding school that I went to went broke, well, was going broke at the time, and Charters Towers City and Dalrymple Shire actually bought the school. It maintained as a school, and about 3 years after we purchased it off them, they purchased it back for just a small contribution over and above what they paid for it. Yeah. So I mean, that was something different that local government hadn't been involved in before. I don't know of any council that ever owned a school, so that was certainly that was only in the early 2000s, so 2001, 2002, I think. Well, I think if you go back far enough, you look at into the IT world today. Well, when I hit Charters Towers, they were still arguing and fighting over a computer that had been installed by a firm that most people had known by the government called Computer Rack. And the owner of Computer Rack was a chap by the name of Bob Dungavel, who came out of Charters Towers. And the council had bought this computer 12 months before I got there. The computer virtually sat there for 12 months before anybody was game to switch it on and get going with it. So they were still fighting, it's still moving notices of motion to get rid of it when I turned up. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Anyway, we worked it out, and that went on for ages and ages, unfortunately. And along with that, I actually had up to, I think, 4 or 5 ex-CEOs still living in the town. CEOs, I had a bloke by the name of Peter McDougall, who was CEO or town clerk sometime before I was there. Alan Sherwin, who was the sacked CEO, he came back on time later. So they did things like that in Charters Towers. As I say, they voted the existing sergeant of police in. So I thought that was a pretty good move on his part. Usually, police sergeants they wouldn't do that for. And I had a third. Jeff Chavot. Jeff was working as an interim CEO when I got there, in between Alan Sherwin and myself, and so he had about 9 months there. But he came back on council later on. So, but it was good. But then I also attracted a number of employees. I had grader drivers, foremen, building inspectors. They all came back. Yeah. So that was all interesting back in those. When you think now where computers and IT is now, you think that couldn't happen That was only in 1980, so it's not that long ago. 35 years ago, maybe.
Was the fax
the
machine?
fax machine.
To get permission to use the fax machine?
How could you put a piece of paper into a fax machine and it appeared somewhere else? I could print it out. I could never get my head around that when it happened. And I walked into Dad's office in Richmond, and he, one weekend I was up there, and he pulled out this piece of paper out of this machine, and he was soaking wet. I said, "What is that?" It was a photocopier.
Oh.
So the photocopier that come out in the
ink.
Not the ink, the fluid that it came out in, soaking wet. So you dry it, then you'd peel it apart, and there'd be your photocopy. So you'd just photocopy. Step before the fax machines. Yeah. And we went through all that. But, I can still remember someone saying, "You need to upgrade those typewriters, move into word processors." I said, "I've heard about them, but what are they?" A word processor. So we continued to use typewriters and electric typewriters and the ball. Oh, we better buy a word processor, as you say. And so you end up with one word processor and one mainframe computer. Then someone says, everyone needs a computer on their desk. This was like some years later. No, we're not going there for all that type of thing.
Yeah.
And here we were worrying about offices with council phones and making local calls on all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. We used to get weekly printouts of the phone calls made on the phone so that you could correlate them and pay for ones that were your private ones.
Yeah, now they wouldn't even worry. No. I think the other major one that we got involved with in Charters House was tourism. I think when you go to some of the major older towns, they're probably bigger and better, but Charters House has got a unique aspect. Now, they've got a lot of old buildings and they're getting to the stage where it's time to
heritage
listed. Yeah. We got tied up with all that and made our heritage policies and tried to make people comply with them, and we had a lot of success. Most of the buildings are still there, whereas in the 70s and mainly the 70s, they're just knocking them down, and I suppose a lot of them were falling down. 50, 80 years and all mainly timber. So we did a lot of good work there, and we got a tourist information centre going that was like a full-time thing. Before that we had nothing. We had the community sort of half-funded some type of organisation down the main street. So we set that up in an old council building next to City Hall, and it was good. It was really good, and it's still going, still rocking along. So they made they did some good stuff with there was a Venus battery, which was an old gold mining processing stamper down there, and we got all that going, and lookouts around the town. So
any low lights? What do you reckon the worst thing about working in local government is?
I suppose now it's the worst thing was councillors, I guess, in hindsight. Yeah. Some councillors, and be they mayors or councillors, some were just horrendous. And it's bigger, it's worse in these bigger places, but some were great. Just fantastic. Just happy to go along, say their piece, discuss whatever, accept the decision. But others.
So as CEO, what do you think were some of the tactics that worked for you to either get, your council working harmoniously?
Well, I think the first one was with the mayor, of course, as we all know that, and I found sometimes you just had to make sure if they were briefed and they didn't sort of push the barrow, you just did. And you had to do it politely, and you'd get councillors firing back at you. And if you made out it wasn't really you and it wasn't your idea, and the best tactic, of course, was just geeing a councillor up before the meeting and say, "Why don't you say something about this? You've been on it for if you don't say it, it won't happen." So they'd say it, and you could confidence boost them, and then you could make a comment back towards them, and suddenly they'd feel good. I mean, that's what it's all about, because we all like a bit of self-praise, and if you said it the right way and they said it the right way, most people accepted it. Yeah, the worst things in local government, I never felt that there was anything really bad. I think the smaller towns, that the recognition was probably not something you wanted outside of council, because I guess everyone knew who you were, and
quite achiever.
Yeah, you were trying to hide all the time, and I make a comment. I went out west, I won't say where, but the last couple of years, and a new councillor that came from a new officer that came from one of the councils down south here, he said, "I can't believe it." He said, "I walk down the street, everyone pulls me up, they want to know what's going on." I said, well, didn't you know that's what's going to happen when you come out here? Oh, no, never happened where I was. I said, mate, everybody knows you're out here and you're going to get pulled up everywhere and expected to, not expected to, but just talk about it. You can discuss.
So in saying that, was there anything you learnt along the way that you had to change about yourself to be successful?
Yes and no. Trying to keep up with everybody was always difficult. Like you go to the conferences and somebody would be talking about such and such and you go, oh boy, I haven't even approached that yet, so I better start doing a bit of homework on it. Yeah, that was always difficult. Wasn't easy. You had no one to bounce it off. Or, I guess there was always a lot of local governments in the region. And in my instance, I think I was there for long enough in the councils from the Burdick and Townsville, Hinchinbrook, Dalrymple and myself. They all had 3 CEOs in the role the whole time I was in Charters Towers, which is, be that good or bad, I don't know. But yeah, just keeping up with what everybody was doing and having sufficient funds to make sure that happened.
Absolutely.
I found that the biggest challenge. Yeah, just being part of the leading in the community, I guess, was always difficult. Like you'd go to some function, they just say, oh, we'll get the CEO up here to say a few words. You go, hang on a minute, I'm not even representing council, I've just turned up, you know. Like Anzac Day or something, we had a bloke there that always seemed to want to go, the mayor, the CEO, so I used to get prepared for them, but yeah, there wasn't much you could say, but no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I like being in a part of the community and getting things done, because you could, especially being in some organisations that you're in, you could always like go back to council and get certain things done that maybe some other people couldn't.
Yeah.
I introduced we always had community organisations asking for assistance, you know, and back then everyone that wrote in would go to the council, so you'd have a discussion for an hour on one particular, I just want to get a grader to do this, da da da. In the end, we just adopted a project where all the facilities, or mainly the grounds of sporting organisations, virtually got it for free. So it was just left to my discretion. Someone would just ring up, I'd say, yep, how much do you want? 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, yep, that's no problem. More than that, you know, you'd start. But anyway, you'd send a grader out for 2 or 3 hours and we'd charge it through, and then we'd put it through the organisation and we'd write it off. So it was all accounted for and covered, and council knew what that contribution was at the end of the year. It was 50,000, 100,000. We used to go and mow their lawns and mow their ovals, and because they all had broken down mowers. Oh, we've got a carnival coming up, can you send the mower out? And we didn't have the facilities to go and do that. We had enough to do the town, so we just bought ourselves a new tractor and a new mower, and so off they'd go and mow the mower. And it could take them 2 hours, whereas it'd take the organisation all day, and plant that was no good, and so we made a lot of massive changes too. Yeah. They really appreciated it.
Just hearing those 2 responses, that finance and probably managing, changing, being abreast of all the changes happening at the time, as well as the councils, were probably some of the most difficult parts of being a CEO role.
Yes, it was, I think so. And I think even when I look back at when I got there, I did write some figures down, but the council had virtually nothing when I got there. They had as little as where did I write that down? Yeah, when I got there in August 1980. You know, in '79 they had 138,000 in the bank. In 1980 they had 49,000. I'm down. 81 237,000. 84 843,000. And 85 1.1 million. So that's the sort of reason. The money we had, all the balances we had. So from then on it was good, but I could see earlier in the situation, because Charters Towers was a very old, staid, conservative town. You know, never did much. Took them years to get the sewerage in. They were still putting sewerage in 1980 when I got there. Whereas Richmond, where I came from, where Dad was, they put that in there in the early 50s. So they were 30 years later. And even down at the south of Brisbane there, they did part of Loganshire and those areas down there. They still had outside dunnies in 1980, 2000, all that type of thing. So Charters Towers was like that, and they were just going backwards and backwards, bit by bit.
So what was the staff numbers back in the 80s, do you
recall? It was very small. Not that it ever grew a lot, but I think we never got round I think we got up around the 100 mark. They probably had about 75,
Yeah.
70 back. Yeah, that's why I think the things you learn there, I mean, even 5 years after, I was still finding things out that hadn't been done, or levies that hadn't been going out for whatever reason, because people just hadn't been. They're on the verge of being taken over by government, I guess.
Yeah. But I guess around that time too, some more of the state funding and the grants, state grants and stuff were there to apply for if you knew about them as well.
Yes, they were.
Yeah.
I got taken aside by a Queensland local government or QTC official. He said to me, you know that application you said you were going to put in for so much? I said, yeah. He said, can you get it in next week and can you double that? I said, but I'm not going to get money like that. He said, just put it in and double it. And sure enough, a month later, we got the extra money. It was just amazing. And, but I look these days and my son's tied up with Queensland Sport and Rec, out west with him anyway, to an opening 2 years ago. The facilities that they're spending on sport and rec out in those communities.
It's good.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
They built this gym for about $800,000. I think they signed up 100 people on the day, which I can easily see dwindling back to 30 active, maybe 20 real active, and yeah. But it's good. I mean, it's really pumping a lot of money back into the communities. I reckon it's great. It's really good.
Most of the CEOs I've spoken to have been so unassuming, and I can see from talking to you that you've really left a legacy at the places that you've worked out. You know, that must, give you I know that you're obviously not someone to sing your praises, but I think, you must look back and smile at, some of the great stuff that you achieved as CEO and the people you worked with, the teams that you worked with. In saying that, what do you think was the best thing about, having a local government career, and would you do it all over again?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, when you say that, it's I look back through, I actually wrote a history of my, I suppose, my career with Charters Towers. And I just read it the other day just to bring myself up to speed.
Oh,
and it was good. It was good. And there's a lot of things in there that we did, and a lot of achievements we made. And you get out of it now. I reckon I'll go back to Charters Towers now. There's certainly a lot of staff still there, which is good. I keep in contact with them on a casual basis. And you feel good when you walk back in there, and someone even shouts you a cup of coffee and a piece of cake. And it's you don't look for it, but the recognition's gone. The people don't remember you, but that's as I've always said. When Dad was in Richmond, I suggested a couple of things, and I went out there and what are you blokes? No. I go back out 12 months and I go, so who suggested that little project that you've done there? Well, we just thought it. We spoke about it in town and we decided to do it. I said, okay, that's all right, because I look at a place like Richmond where they did a lot for a number of years, as much as they could. And in recent years, they've built great water lakes out there for the people. But I keep saying, they say, they're doing a great job. I keep saying, yeah, but if the council was before you and
the foundations,
the staff before you didn't do those foundations, you'd be still back there trying to get all that done. So I reckon that's a great bit. Get there, get it to a certain level, and the next people come along and are prepared to, hopefully, run with it and keep going, keep improving the town, because those places, that's all they've got. If you haven't got a council that's working actively in those communities, it ain't going to happen. And unfortunately, I think with amalgamation, a lot of that is probably still occurring. When you look at all the small towns on the Darling Downs that have been combined, and you wonder just how. I mean, you go through them now; they all look pretty good.
But thank you very much. I appreciate what you've.
Thank you for taking this on. It's a big task.
No, it's fantastic. As I said, recognising the contributions to local government, because as we've said, that groundwork started back with you guys as the leading CEOs at the time, and you truly were, as somebody that joined the LGMA back in the IMM back in the end of the 90s. It really, for me, was like, wow, look at these amazing people doing these amazing things. I wish there were a few more women in there, but
like there was Leanne Mash, and there was there was only one when I was coming through. The lady that was at Goondiwindi.
It's been fantastic.
Okay, thanks very much.
So, John, what would your advice be to newcomers and prospective local government CEOs?
Well, things have changed. I've been out of the industry for 10 years. And probably, Kim, you'd have a better idea. I'm asking your CEOs what they'd contribute to that. But I guess if you go back to the grassroots of it all, it really is just trying to make the organisation work. I think when you look at some of the things that have happened in other councils now, they've probably got so big, I guess, but the CEO has just got to make it work, make the place stable. It's not always possible with maybe some of the staff and definitely with some of the mayors and councillors, but if you can get the right councillor or the right mayor, which I've seen work so much in local government throughout the state over the years, you're halfway there, you're 9/10 of the way there. It's a great career. It's really good to be part of the IMM, the Institute, and to be part of the community, because you do receive the results. And unfortunately, many CEOs have moved on now before they can make that contribution. But as I said, I had 28 years in Charters Tower, so it's good to look back and see what you can achieve. Really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And from all accounts, what I've learnt from you today, you did an awesome job. So thank you so much for your contribution to local government and 2020 elections.
No, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I finally found something I'm good at. Doing nothing.
Not true. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.